in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, June 16th, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Devon Carbado, professor of law at UCLA and author of Unreasonable, Black Lives, Police Power, and the Fourth Amendment. Meanwhile, the January 6th hearings continue today, where they'll focus on Trump's efforts to pressure Pence into rejecting the electoral count. Just do it. Do it, Mike. The committee also revealed that Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny, was corresponding with Trump goon John Eastman about overturning the election.
Normal stuff.
Normal. And the leader of the Proud Boys was given plans to occupy congressional buildings, the committee found. They called it the 1776 Returns, with a section entitled Storm the Winter Palace.
Oh my god.
They could have just done parkour in their homes. They wanted to be in
Game
Mission
of Thrones
Impossible.
house.
Yeah. But they stormed the Capitol instead, I guess.
Winter Palace.
I know, it's the White House. Right?
Yeah, I guess. Or Congress. I don't know,
Yes.
one of the two.
Idiotic. The Fed raised interest rates by 75 basis points yesterday, the largest increase since 1994. Some experts warn that could send the U.S. into a recession. We could help combat inflation with some price controls on oil and gas. We'll get into that in a second. The DOJ has charged the Buffalo mass murderer with 26 counts of federal hate crimes and weapons violations. Some of the charges could lead to the death penalty if the federal government seeks it. We're against that in principle. The New Mexico State Supreme Court has ordered Republican election officials to certify the results of the primary from 9 days ago. They have refused to because of Dominion voting machines being used. Expect more of this, by the way. Sarah Palin has advanced to the August special election for the state's only House seat in Alaska.
Countdown to retirement begins.
I know. How long will she make it? We don't know. She didn't make it through her full time as the governor. It's a lot of work.
There's shorter terms, I guess.
Oh, 2 years I can do.
Ah.
Good news for the content. And lastly, Herschel Walker has admitted that he has not one, but 2 secret sons.
Wait, I think it was 2 in addition to the one we found out yesterday.
It's 2 more secret sons.
So, yeah.
He only produces secret sons, not secret daughters.
I would love to see the Charlie Kirk follow-up with Herschel Walker about absentee fathers.
Me too. Where are the fathers? Where is Father Herschel? All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone. Happy to have you. It's Thursday, so it's an Majority Report day. I got to get that merch, and that's in the works. I've just forgotten to do any work on that front. What? Now your mute button's back.
Oh, my mute button is back. Did you negotiate a percentage yet? Because I still need to do that.
Oh. I didn't even think to do that, honestly.
No,
This
me
is
either.
why I need your...
I literally just did.
So you did it.
No, I just thought of doing that. Like, we should maybe,
We probably should.
yeah, be capitalists here.
That stuff does not come naturally to me. I got to be honest
No,
with you.
I avoid it, actually. That's
Yeah.
why. That's kind of why I do this job.
Right. So I mentioned this in headlines, but oil prices, they're out of control. And, I understand that that's hurting a lot of people in this country. I feel incredibly lucky that during these time periods, I'm fairly insulated from it because I walk and take the subway.
I got two offers that I was thinking about accepting for grad school, which one was Pepperdine in Malibu and the other was here in New York. And I choose New York because of the public transportation. Even though I like driving in North Dakota, I used to just do it often cheap gas in North Dakota. I wanted to get out of that, and it's horrible.
And Pepperdine's supposed to be like the most beautiful university in the country.
Yeah,
so.
That's fine. I'll take New York.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of you are probably dealing with this right now, and it's hard to discern really how much price gouging by these oil companies is contributing to gasoline prices. But it's a substantial amount. It's certainly a substantial amount. And with inflation in general, gasoline is accounting for, I think I saw David Dayen write 20% of inflation last month, which also contributes to the inflation of other goods increasing.
Oh yeah, it's fundamental.
Because of because of our supply chains and because how much is needed to manufacture those kinds of things. You can put that up from Warren Gunnels.
Yeah, that's good. Warren Gunnels, he's a Bernie Sanders advisor, says oil prices today $115 a barrel, gas prices today $5 a gallon. Oil prices in 2008 $116. Gas prices in 2008 $3.51 a gallon. He says gas prices are $1.50 a gallon higher than they should be because of the greed of big oil. No dispute there. It's time for a windfall profits tax. I would say at the very least.
At the very least.
Like that the problem with I think where we are politically in this country is like, and I'm not criticizing Gunnels here, like really.
That's a politically possible thing within the context of a Biden administration, if anything at all.
But it's like we're talking about the FDR administration. You need to threaten, like that should be at that you're getting taxed. There's going to be a windfall tax.
Yeah.
The threat should be we're going to nationalize you and kick all the profiteers out of this industry and decide who gets to get oil and at what price. And instead, a windfall tax, look, if that's what happened after that threat because Congress is Congress and you couldn't get a revolution, fine. But, yeah, I mean, that's for everybody that's wondering why gas prices are so high. It's not because the Democrats are too unfriendly to the oil industry. That's an oil industry talking point. Come on, guys. It's because those profiteers aren't, I mean, well, we'll play this Ducey clip now. Yeah,
let's play this Ducey clip now. And just to buttress Gunnels' point and Matt's point here, oil companies are seeing record profits right now. The relationship between the barrel price and the price at the pump is entirely fractured, and that fracture is due to greed by oil and gas companies, and they're flexing their muscle. And frankly, I would also say we're going to see a lot more of this during Democratic administrations when they talk about climate change at all. Hey, you want to regulate us? You want to cut into our profits? We're going to make you pay politically by making oil and gas a lot more expensive. But here's Peter Ducey asking John Kirby about of the Biden administration. What's his official title?
He was the Pentagon press secretary, but he's now like a coordinator within the National Security Council.
Gotcha.
He's just like a amorphous
blob guy.
Yeah,
right.
Literal blob guy.
A blob guy, both in his title and in what he represents. And so he has this interaction with Peter Ducey about Biden's upcoming trip to Saudi Arabia, where he's going to beg for oil, because like Matt just said, there's no stick approach with Biden. It's just please, come on, man, and no like threats, actual threats, as opposed to marginal taxes. Here's this interaction.
I have a question about U.S. national security. How is it that you guys have determined that it's in the U.S. national security interest to ask Saudi Arabia to drill more oil instead of just letting oil companies drill more here in the U.S.?
Well, I think Peter, there's some 9,000 unused drilling permits here in the United States as well. Look, the oil production issue is a global issue, and OPEC plus 3 has already increased preset increases by more than 50% just for July and August. And we're grateful to Saudi Arabia's leadership on that. But we've never said that, it's a national security interest that somebody has to pump more oil. And again, there's unused permits here in the United States.
But as a national strategic issue.
So, I mean, there's a good interaction that I think displays the limited contours of how the Biden administration and naturally, just establishment politicians are viewing this. Because there, I think, are a few options that need to be considered or should be implemented, frankly. One, Biden needs to implement price controls. We've done price controls to combat inflation in wartime in the past, during World War I and World War II, where the public is more amenable to that kind of thing in theory. But frankly, if it's going to get oil and gas prices under control, the political benefits will follow. Biden's just terrified that he's going to get called socialist by Fox News, which he is already getting called, as they hit him on oil and gas prices at the pump. So that is what needs to happen in the short term. Then you can also begin to normalize relations with Venezuela if you're so worried about oil and gas. And thirdly, the big, big goal is nationalizing this, as Matt said. This is, Bradley was talking about this before the show too. This is the ultimate indication of a failure of neoliberalism, that we are held hostage by these massive oil and gas companies and are at the whims of what they've decided the prices are going to be. And if Mohammed bin Salman wants to be petty and doesn't like Biden because he didn't suck up to him sufficiently, and also wants to make him pay politically, so somebody is gonna, maybe he can tilt the scales just a little bit on election day for a guy that's in his favor who won't do anything about oil and gas, or a woman, but on the Republican side that's not very likely. He's going to do it. They have the ability to flex their muscles as long as we go down this path of being beholden to them and not nationalizing them.
Yeah, it's not clear to me why we didn't go. We talked about this with Derek and Danny of American Prestige on Left Reckoning last night, but why they didn't, at least also both, if you're going to do Saudi Arabia, do Venezuela too. Open up diplomacy there. And looked like there was some hints toward that. And the inertia of the American government and wanting to basically discipline countries that aren't friendly to it, as opposed to bend over backwards to apologize for countries that do support us, like Saudi Arabia, is just really pronounced. But it's really disheartening. This is why we've not gotten anywhere on climate or oil, is because nobody in the video we just showed is a good person.
Yeah.
And on the one side you have the hack journalist representing right-wing interests, representing the oil industry, saying, hey, as the oil industry is gouging us, the question is framed, why won't you let the oil industry save us? And then you have
the oil industry, but with the American flag painted on it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the Biden administration, which is we're going to just ask nicely around the oil industry and Saudi Arabia and all the various sociopaths and see what they get us.
It's deeply unserious.
Work together with us.
But we can't deal with Venezuela, Matt, because they are a totalitarian, awful country that treats its people wrong. Oh wait, as I go fly over to Saudi Arabia to kiss
Blinken is still talking about Guaido.
MBS on the mouth. Yeah.
I mean, it's a farce.
All right, with that said, we are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be joined by Devon Carbado, professor of law at UCLA and author of Unreasonable, Black Lives Police Power and the Fourth Amendment. We'll be right back. And we are back. We are joined now by Devon Carbado, professor of law at UCLA and author of Unreasonable: Black Lives, Police Power, and the Fourth Amendment. Devon, thanks so much for being here today.
Not at all. It really is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to our conversation. So part of what I loved about your book is that you do not treat the Constitution as a religious text, pure in its intentions and pure in the outcomes that it tries to realize. That's a pet peeve of mine in American discourse, where it's like the Bible. I think at best that's an ignorant perspective. At worst, it's a racist one. I mean, talk a little bit about the structural, the Fourth Amendment in general, and why you chose to focus on it, and why, in your estimation, it's flawed in terms of how it sets up the police state in this country.
So there are a couple of ways to think about that. I'm sure if your listeners were asked to articulate the Miranda warnings, they would probably be able to do it, because whatever our views are of policing, we probably have our favorite cop show. So everyone knows the Miranda warnings, but people don't necessarily know the text of the Fourth Amendment. So let's think about exactly what the text says. It says we have a right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. And the basic idea is that this text was supposed to create some kind of boundary between lay people and the police. But for Black people, the Fourth Amendment operates more like a gateway. That is to say, it provides the police with access to Black bodies in a number of distinct ways. The easiest way to understand what I mean is, again, for a minute, to just focus on the text, just for a minute. Unreasonable searches and seizures. So what that means basically is if what the police officer does to you is neither a search nor a seizure, then the officer needs no justification. So if you're walking on the street, Emma, and cops approach you, question you, ask for permission to search, etc., none of that is a seizure. None of that implicates the Fourth Amendment. So what that means is that the government can do that, police officers can do that without any justification at all. That's one problem. The other problem is that even when what you have is a search or a seizure, the courts make it really easy for police officers to justify it. The classic example is stops and frisks. Stops are seizures, frisks are search, but you just need reasonable suspicion. If I were to ask you to guess, reasonable suspicion, what do you think that translates to as a probability? What's it?
Probably being Black, or as a probability. I mean, not being white, and being in the neighborhood where police want to rack up some numbers for their arrest records, for their quotas.
Fair enough. If I were to ask you to put a number to it, a percentage, and we'll come back to the being Black part in a minute, I promise.
A percentage of what? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what probability? So is it 50% likelihood of doing something wrong? Is it 20% likelihood of doing something wrong? What is reasonable suspicion
for what constitutes it in practice?
Yeah.
Probably what, 10%?
Probably around that. So it's a really low bar. And part of what the court has said with respect to interpreting reasonable suspicion as well is that if you are in a quote unquote high crime area, that gives cops, that is a factor on which cops can rely to say they have reasonable suspicion. So just being in a quote unquote high crime area, we know what high crime area means. It's code word for Black or brown community.
Right. And so just being in that area is enough to create reasonable suspicion. The reasonable suspicion standard that you mentioned, talk about Terry versus Ohio and how that's set up. Maybe it goes back further than that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you cite this in your book. The concept of reasonable suspicion, which also paves the way for stop and frisk. We film here in Brooklyn. We're intimately aware of stop and frisk policies in New York City. What did that decision do for those kinds of police procedures and conduct?
Sure. So I'll back up just a bit and say that with respect to what counts of reasonable suspicion, just to be clear about it, the court says if you are in a high crime area A, and you're fleeing the police B, that effectively is enough to give the officer reasonable suspicion. So just think about what that means. But to go back in time to 1968, just think about what's going on in that particular moment. A lot is going on in 1968 in America. The Supreme Court is called upon to determine the constitutionality of stops and frisks. And the person who actually writes the opinion is Justice Warren. Why is that significant? Because Justice Warren is the person who also authored Brown versus Board of Education, the famous case that, of course, declared that separate but equal is unconstitutional. And what Justice Warren does in that case is to say, look, we are effectively going to allow police officers to stop and frisk people. I'm simplifying the ruling a little bit, to stop and frisk people without probable cause. So probable cause is thrown by the wayside, and reasonable suspicion becomes the standard for police officers to stop and frisk, which means it's a low evidentiary hurdle for cops to have. So that is the birth of stop and frisk in constitutional law.
And what that decision, was it unanimous or nearly unanimous? I mean, what can you talk a little bit about the historical context of that decision? Because obviously, that's an era of civil rights, lots of change a little bit after that, but the court had gotten a lot of, I think maybe now contemporarily gets a lot of credit for some of the decisions that they landed on during that time period, but this one has not aged well.
This one has not aged well. And there are a couple of ways to think about it. So Justice Marshall actually signs on to this opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a part of the justices who say, we've got to do this. And remember, this is a moment in which there's the rhetoric about law and order already emerging, and the sense that we have to do something to control expressions of civil disobedience, to control, again, what people perceive to be unrest more generally. And this was the way in which Justice Warren negotiated that. Now, just a year or so later, Marshall quickly peels off and says, I can't believe we did this. Look what reasonable suspicion now means. But he is a part of the group that says reasonable suspicion is going to be enough to justify stopping and frisking people. Fast forward to the Floyd case. You know a lot about the Floyd case. It takes place in New York, where the question becomes whether the NYPD is violating the Constitution, and Judge Ashera Shindlin concludes that, in fact, there is a constitutional violation, both under the Fourth Amendment and under the 14th. And that was kind of a remarkable moment. And many people concluded from that somehow stop and frisk have been abolished. They've not been abolished. It's still perfectly constitutional for police officers to use stop and frisk, again, based on reasonable suspicion. The problem for Judge Shindlin was that New York police officers didn't even have reasonable suspicion. So her quarrel with the NYPD was around the fact that they were stopping people, frisking people without reasonable suspicion. And some of the data that I should give you a sense of might be helpful. So between 2004 and 2012, there were 4.4 million stops. That's a ton. Only 12% of which, only 12% culminated in arrest. 12%, think about that.
So that, yeah. So, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that lends credence to what people understand fundamentally if they've listened to this show, but that it is a vehicle for harassment as opposed to the actual outcomes that are said to be being sought.
Precisely. And to underscore that point, 52% of the people who were 52% of the people who were stopped were also frisked, and wait for it, in only 1% of those people did they find weapons. So again, they're not finding weapons, they're not arresting people. It's a programmatic project of discipline and social control rather than a serious law a serious investigatory tool to solve crimes.
So now here's like the bigger question about that, and we can return to some of the different ways that policing exploits the Fourth Amendment. But is it not just is the system of control inherent to the Fourth Amendment, or do you believe that it was bastardized in order to fit into our, white supremacist police state? Because to me, I think the subjectivity inherent in the text, I lean more towards the former.
So there are a couple of ways to think about that. One is to first take the historical perspective and ask, so who was the Fourth Amendment intended to protect? So remember, the Fourth Amendment is added to the Constitution in 1791. So it's part of the Bill of Rights. Why is that significant? It's significant because in 1791, we're talking about a slave constitution. We're talking about a constitution that legitimized and anticipated slavery. That's the A part. The B part is it's also a constitution that imagines that Black people will be recaught by slave masters without any due process at all. So one could say, against that historical backdrop, that the Fourth Amendment is working the way the Fourth Amendment was supposed to work. It wasn't intended to protect Black people. I don't think that's a particularly controversial argument. And indeed, what you could say, if you're an originalist, you should understand that originally the Fourth Amendment was not intended for us, where us means Black people. Again, shouldn't be a controversial argument. Now, having said all that, you and I both know that constitutional text, when you read the text, are not self-executing. By that I mean you add value to them. And part of the ways in which I demonstrate that particular point in the book is through chapter 6 and chapter 7. So in chapter 6 of the book, I have the readers engage an opinion called Wren versus United States. So this is a unanimous opinion in which the court actually constitutionalizes racial profiling. And let me be clear about what I mean by that. So let's say the police observe me driving down the street of Los Angeles afternoon as well. Both of us are driving down the street of Los Angeles. There's no dispute about that, trafficking. But they realize they can only stop one of us. So Officer A says to Officer B, let's stop the Black person. And to avoid any confusion, I will be the Black person, not you. So they stop me in this particular moment. And the question becomes, is that constitutional? The Supreme Court says yes, under the Fourth Amendment. Why? Because the officer had probable cause to stop us. So the fact that the officer chose to stop me based on race doesn't matter if the officer has probable cause. Again, a unanimous Supreme Court, including the great, late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, co-signs this, right? So that's a very clear moment in which racial profiling is being constitutionalized. And why that matters. So this is the only piece of legal advice I will give, which is this. If you drive your car, you violate a traffic code. You cannot drive without violating the traffic code, which means that it's easy for police officers to stop you anyway. And now they can stop you on the basis of race, consistent with the Fourth Amendment. So I have the readers read that particular opinion so they can get a sense of the ease with which Black lives can be disposable in the context of constitutional law. And then I have them read the next chapter, which is my rewriting that opinion in a way that comes out differently, to say that you can read the Fourth Amendment, notwithstanding its history, to actually make Black lives matter more than they currently do in the context of law. So it's a nice juxtaposition in the sense of saying that's what the court did. It wasn't inexorable. This is what they could have done. Read it. Tell me if I'm crazy.
Well, Ruth Bader Ginsburg did seem to have somewhat of a blind spot when it comes to race. I think, that this opinion not aging well is a bit in keeping with her history, which is, like many people, complicated. But I am fascinated by the you mentioned about if you were an originalist, you would have the context that you then describe about the Fourth Amendment. Can you expand on the notion of, and this is a bit of a larger question, I apologize if it's a diversion, the Constitution and amendments like the Fourth Amendment being there to protect property owners, in particular, men that held property, which at the time included slaves, and how that is just so inextricable from the context that we're living in today in 2022 when looking at this document?
I mean, I think the bottom line here, I think, to be somewhat simplistic about it, is that originalists tend to be selectively originalist. By that I mean, they're not originalist about the original sins of this nation vis-a-vis its racial and gender projects. I mean, it's absolutely uncontestable that our constitutional history is rooted in sexism, is rooted in patriarchy, is rooted in racism, and that's there. People do make arguments about the extent to which the Reconstruction moment fixed all of that. But it's after the Reconstruction moment that we get Jim Crow. So it's unclear how one can mark that moment as a fix to a racial project when that moment becomes its own new racial project. And one of the ways I sometimes think about this with respect to questions about racial justice is to sort of think about it in 7 days. And at the end of which there's kind of a multiple choice question. So in day one, there's no dispute that group A has been enslaved. Everyone say, yeah, that happened. Day two, let's just say slavery ends, at least formal chattel slavery ends, but there's still an afterlife of slavery. There's no compensating group A for the fact that they were enslaved. None of that, but anyway, slavery ends. That's day two. Day three, group A is now Jim Crowed. Everyone agrees that that happened, subject to constitutionalized, legalized racial segregation. That's day three. Day four, there's no compensation for that, but at least you have Brown versus Board of Education, which says you can't have racial segregation in the context of schools. Day five, there's massive resistance to Brown versus Board of Education. Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. You have intentional discrimination everywhere. You have violence preventing Black people to vote. All of that is happening. And then you have day six. You have civil rights intervention, the second Reconstruction, anti-discrimination law. And day seven, the same group A is over-incarcerated, underemployed, overrepresented in homelessness, circumscribed access to the ballot, underrepresented in political leadership, underrepresented in educational institution. And the multiple choice question is, why? Answer A, there's something wrong with group A. Answer B, it's just chance that group A's history happened, but it's not playing a role with respect to what's happening to group A now. Or answer C, it's because of a racialized history why you see this. I pick C. Now, you can have a fight about it, but it seems to me that the basic way to understand contemporary forms of racial inequality is to tell that 1 through 6 story and get people to pick a fight with you. So what are you going to fight with me about? Which day did I get wrong? It's hard to say that I got any of those days wrong, I think, unless I'm missing something.
No, you didn't. I mean, and I mean, frankly, it's just willful ignorance to ignore those kinds of steps, and we do not have the requisite historical understanding in this country, I think, for a lot of people to deal with that. But I mean, you know.
And at the same time, not to interrupt you, we're trying to close down conversations about that history before we even understand it.
That, I mean, that's absolutely correct, and that's purposeful, frankly. I want to take a bit of a turn because you talk about the structure of policing in your book, and you identify seven different levels of policing in this country. Can you dive into those levels and talk a bit about them?
Sure, and I'll precisely because you're not reading the text and people are listening, I'll make it slightly less complex. But the basic idea is this. In thinking about problems of police violence, the first question you might ask yourself is this. What are the forces that create the possibility for police officers to interact with Black people to begin with? And the reason one wants to ask that question is this. Repeated exposure to the police creates the possibility that they can harm you. If you're not having contact with the police, they can't stop and frisk you, they can't kill you. So a central question is, what are the factors that puts African Americans in front of the police? I argue Fourth Amendment is one such factor. So that's one important structure we need to think about. Another important structure has to do with police culture, police trainings, police unions. If police culture encourages violence even implicitly, then clearly you will see violence. If police trainings don't attend to problems of violence, clearly you will see violence. And if police unions are much more interested in, say, protecting police officers and holding them accountable, again, you'll see violence. Another crucial question that we sometimes don't think enough about is this. What happens when police violence interacts with the legal system? By that I mean, there's no dispute that someone's been brutalized, no dispute that someone's been killed. What now happens when one brings those facts in front of the legal system? What are the outputs? One output is justifiable force. Police violence plus the legal system equals justifiable force. And there are a number of ways in which your listeners, I know, have seen this. One is prosecutorial decisions not to bring charges. Someone's been brutalized, someone's been killed, but the prosecutor says, I'm not going to bring charges. That's a justifiable force moment. Or the prosecutor brings charges, but the grand jury says, we're not going to issue an indictment. That's another moment in which police violence, legal system, justifiable force. Or prosecutor brings charges, grand jury issues an indictment, and a judge or a jury says, no conviction. These are all moments in which police violence, fact, enters the legal system and comes out as justifiable force. That's one problem. Another problem, of course, is qualified immunity. I'm not in this moment going to get into the whole of qualified immunity, because if I do, you'll be saying, come back, Devon, come back, and I won't be able to. But the point is that everyone understands that qualified immunity erects a really high bar to holding police officers accountable. Everyone kind of gets that. The debate is whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, not whether it's a thing. The problem is even worse in the sense that assuming you jump the qualified immunity hurdle and you win a lawsuit against a police officer, assuming you do that, who pays the damages? Not the police officer, your tax dollars. Cities and municipalities end up paying. And finally, try suing a police department or a city for acts of violence in which its officers engage. You will not win. That is an impossible project.
Well, you mentioned, sorry to cut you off, but Breonna Taylor's, the money that was paid to her family is a great example of that coming out of the coffers of the taxpayer, as opposed to, the police department being held accountable. Continue, I apologize.
And you can have, and there are lots and lots of examples of just that point. The disparity is quite staggering between what police officers actually pay and what cities and municipalities pay. So we are paying for police violence is the way to think about it.
And we're experiencing this in real time in the fallout from the Uvalde massacre, where you see the police department got 40% of the town's budget in Uvalde, and it seems that they are dodging or attempting to cover up something because their story has changed around a dozen times about what actually went down when there was the active mass shooter inside of that elementary school. And I'm a bit frustrated because it feels like we're still having the same conversation and Republicans are already saying police need more funding when they were incredibly well funded. There were tens of police officers there with as much gear as they could possibly imagine, and it still seemed to do nothing, and they're still lying and hiding from investigators within the state of Texas. Why do you see, I'm curious about your thoughts about what's happening in Uvalde, but two, why is there this persistent desire, seemingly from a lot of the public, to see these incidents as anomalies as opposed to obvious patterns?
So I want to answer your question not by talking about that particular moment in a way, because we have more information, more data that's available to your listeners and that I would encourage them to take a look at by way of Ferguson. Why do I say by way of Ferguson? Because Ferguson ended up producing a Department of Justice report. And that report is a must read. Why? Because it reveals the extent to which racism and classism were bureaucratized as ordinary features of governance. By that I mean, the report reveals the degree to which policing was employed as a revenue-generating mechanism and ended up funding 20 to 35% of the city's budget. So you see how this ties into the question that you raised. We have that data. We know how it operates, where people issue fines, right, that they can't pay. So the standard way in which this worked was something like this. You get a warrant for something ridiculous. You show up, let's say, because there's a mandatory court appearance. You can't afford to pay. What happens? Well, maybe you get arrested in the spot, or you get a higher fine, or plausibly, you get your driver's license revoked, and then you drive without your driver's license and you're arrested. I mean, all of this resulted in a regime of social control where people would find themselves fined, arrested, incarcerated, can't get out of jail because they have no money to post bail, and the collateral consequences of all of that. So it's implicated not just police officers, but a system of governance writ large, which is why it's a mistake to have a conversation about policing that focuses on whether individual police officers are engaged in individual acts of violence against individual Black people. That's not the way to think about it. We should be asking ourselves, what are the sources of police power? How are those sources implicated in government? And how can we peel away at those particular structures?
You mentioned how the traffic stop dynamic, and how the more interactions that you have with police, the more likely you are going to be a victim of police violence, etc. What is your sense about and I guess, what did you study and research about the legal basis behind traffic policing? Because frankly, it seems like if we want to defund the police and restructure them, which I do, traffic cops and having police with guns there to stop somebody for a traffic violation should be one of the first things to go. What is some of the legal precedent that has led to that being such a large part of police work? And how does that get detangled? Well, untangled.
I think the precedent is very much the case that I referenced earlier, and I only told part A of the story about that case. Again, the Wren versus United States case. Part of what that case does as well, to be clear, it suggests that officers can use traffic stops as a pretext to investigate crimes for which they have no probable cause. So again, remember what I said earlier, that if you drive a car, police officers can find some easy way to stop you because you're going to violate a traffic code. I mean, that's just going to happen. And I should be clear to give you some examples of some of those violations. So tell me what this means. Driving left of center on a grade or a curve. I don't know what that means. Driving too slowly, following too closely. I mean, these are all predicate bases on which an officer can stop you. So the officer can stop you. You drive, you can get stopped. That's the A. And the officer can now legitimately investigate some of the crime for which the officer has no probable cause. If the officer stops you for driving left of center on a grade or a curve, if the officer stops you for that, the officer can effectuate a full-blown arrest for whatever that is, which we don't know what it is, but whatever it is, the officer can arrest you for it. If the officer stops you for that, the officer can ask you to get out the car, just willy-nilly. If there's a passenger in the car, the officer can ask the passenger to get out the car. I mean, so part of the story I tell in the book about traffic stops is the way in which they can function as gateway seizures. So people need to understand all the ways in which traffic stops can expose people to more intrusive encounters and ones that can culminate in death. It's not accidental, or shouldn't be surprising, that some of the episodes of police killings have as their starting point a traffic stop. Shouldn't surprise us. And so thinking about the source of police power then in the traffic stop context is crucial. So I agree that peeling away that power would be an important move to make.
How do you feel about, we're talking about gun control in this country right now, and it's something I'm 100% in favor of, and I can't speak for you, but I think many people are. It's quite popular, banning assault rifles, among other things. But you talk about how the Fourth Amendment has been so abused by police in a racist way, targeting Black people, other non-white groups in this country. Do you feel that there's a tension between some of those calls for gun control and how that might fall on non-white members of American society if that were to come to pass?
Say more about what you mean by that. If in other words, how gun control would affect
Say there's some sort of searches and seizures and weaponry that would be targeted. Would that lead to more police power structurally that could be used in order to target Black people in the country?
I mean, my views on gun control are pretty mainstream. I mean, I think most people think that we're kind of out of sync with respect to the degree to which people can access guns and the kinds of guns that are floating about every day on in our various neighborhoods. I mean, I think so. So the gun control thing, I don't fully get why it's such a hard nut to crack, but I really, as a foreigner, I mean, I don't completely understand that, but it's something that is hard to make progress on, again, for reasons I don't fully understand. The only thing I want to say about the gun control issue as it relates specific to the Second Amendment takes us back to a point about law and legal consciousness in this sense. And think about what could happen to Roe v. Wade, what likely will happen, or how that will shake out. People on the right make Supreme Court cases a project. They talk about them, they mobilize them in their political organizing, and they change the law. The Second Amendment now was not what it was 2 decades ago. People on the left, not so much. I mean, we don't have our cases that we lift up. We don't. Who talks about Wren versus United States? Like a case that constitutional. I mean, who knows that case? Who knows that in order to bring a discrimination suit against the government, you need to prove that someone acted intentionally against you? Who's going to prove that? So solving racism by way of finding a bad actor. I mean, how much dismantling of racial inequality is that going to perform? Who's marching saying this case is crazy? Meanwhile, conservatives have their cases, their projects that build on legal consciousness to stage social movements. And I think the left is behind on that score.
I'd love to, Fair enough. I mean, my question was really just about how, some of the gun control measures historically, were targeting Black Panther members. I want us to be and it's a bit beyond the scope of your book, I understand, but intentional about not using these measures to further embolden police, give them more resources that they can use to crack down on non-white people in this country.
Yeah, I think that there's always a way in which particular kind of rights are asymmetrically dished out. So from rights to citizenship to rights to gun, whatever the right is, Black people are not going to have it in the same way that white people. I mean, that's like my starting point. So, and one can think about that across every dimension. And indeed, even if we think about reproductive justice and reproductive rights, I mean, the right to that Black women experience very differently than white women, for example. So I think any right you name, I will say there's an asymmetrical arrangement with respect to people's ability to access it. And guns are no different in that regard. Absolutely.
I wanted to touch on the point that you just made about how the right has their hobby horses, for lack of a better phrase. They have their Roe, they have their Casey, they have their Supreme Court cases that are the targets that they use to galvanize voters. But more importantly, in my opinion, they have legal apparatuses, or they have groups that like the Federalist Society, other ways that they're stacking the courts with judges who are going to put forward their agenda. And so, as you say, the left doesn't have that, but there are some, hopefully, that the Biden administration is doing a good job in this regard. They are confirming federal judges at a rapid rate. Yeah. And we need more of that, frankly.
I mean, let's just go, just think about the past opportunities that were missed.
Right.
And the degree to which this was just not a project. I mean, not a project of thinking about, you've got to have justices and judges who are going to think about law in a liberatory, egalitarian way. Imagine that. It's controversial to want judges who are going to be egalitarian about the Constitution, that is somehow an issue that one needs to fight for. But it wasn't the case, or it hasn't been the case, that the judiciary has been a focus of people who hold egalitarian principles. It's been an issue for people who, think that, the Constitution should be interpreted in ways that deny people freedoms.
Yes, and so that, I think that we're a bit Johnny-come-lately on that front, unfortunately, and I don't know how many rights are going to roll back in the decades that we're going to be catching up to that time period. But I guess I was curious of what you made of the right's ability to prioritize their agenda in the court system, and how what that means for the next few decades, as I say, the future in this country, where we're now playing catch up.
We are playing catch up, and I think we need to think about that playbook that has put us in this particular position. And there are a couple of ways to take up that question. If we remind ourselves, for example, that the Supreme Court is not the only game in town, that there are other spaces for law reform, recognizing that law reform isn't the only answer, of course, but it is one place to effectuate some kind of change. Then one can take a bottom-up approach. I mean, think about where we landed with respect to something like marriage equality. Marriage equality didn't start at the Supreme Court. It started at people pushing, their employers to do something, and then city government to do something, and then state legislators and state courts to do something, and then the Supreme Court caught up. So it reversed the order of change, if you like, by making it a local set of interventions that percolated up in a particular kind of way. And I think there are a lot of ways in which one might have to think about that kind of strategy vis-a-vis a range of social justice questions, not to see the Supreme Court to reign. I don't believe that, can't give that up, but to think about other avenues for specifically focus on law reform, again, with the big caveat that this is not the only or even the most important game in town, but recognizing that if you're in this particular space, that it's not just about the Supreme Court.
Well, Devon Carbado, professor of law at UCLA, author of Unreasonable, Black Lives, Police Power, and the Fourth Amendment. We will put a link to your book in the description. If you're listening on a podcast, it will also be there, and at majority.fm. Devon, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate the discussion.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. All right. With that said, we are going to wrap up the first hour of this program, but not before taking a rocket ship to the Matt Lekian media universe.
Yeah, we had Derek Davison and Daniel Bessner of American Prestige on to talk about foreign policy, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia. We also talked about the Democrats and how they seem sort of just like a ghost ship headed for oblivion into the midterms as they don't do anything. So, and we also, we went deep on Bitcoin and some other stuff. So patreon.com/leftreckoning, we had David's friend Rob in the free post game last night, which aired on twitch.tv/leftreckoning. So check that stuff out.
Yes. All right. Well, we don't have him yet, but that's fine. You guys know what to do. If you would like to, I don't know why I said that, but check out Doomed, check out Scam Economy, both of Matt Binder's shows, especially if you're interested in the crypto crash right now. Binder is prescient, and so he got ahead of this crypto crash, and also the Discourse, which is the show of Brandon Sutton. All right, I just got distracted for a second. We'll be taking your calls in the fun half, 646-257-3920. That is the first time I did that from memory. There you go. Wow. Oof. And I didn't even stumble. And we'll be doing some clips, including Anna Delvey will be making an appearance in the fun half. Will I attempt the accent? You'll have to see.
Check your wire.
That's pretty good.
The wire's wrong.
All right, guys. See you in the fun half.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second. Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's...
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single frickin' day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go for a ride.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
654 $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
Call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
We are back. We have Matt Binder, and soon we will have Brandon Sutton. But first, we have his empty chair. Where? Oh my goodness. We can't hear you though, dude. Oh. When are you gonna not put your camera on top of a stack of books? Like, when are you gonna update your setup?
Well, I was going to the bathroom, so you guys kind of caught me at a weird time in my life. But to your other question, I don't record video when I do my own show, so I've never had to think about it. What would you suggest? Like a tripod?
Yeah, I don't know. Yes, maybe.
What do you do? Like a scissor arm? I have a scissor arm for my microphone, but
we got giant
not for my
tripods.
camera.
Yeah, right.
See, I don't have that kind of, I'm not
we should
liquid
probably
like
provide
that.
you with
the kids say.
We probably should, yes.
I
Anyway,
have no excuse for being so.
what's up? What's happening, guys? What's happening over on Doomed and Scam Economy?
Oh, lots of stuff are happening, especially on Scam Economy, as I'm sure you can believe.
Right.
But first, on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, I had on Alyssa Azar. She was the independent journalist whose videos went viral because she was at that Pride event in Idaho, and she's the one who caught the Patriot Front guys being arrested out of that back of that U-Haul truck. So she joined me on the show on Doom to discuss, what happened there and what other right-wing groups that were also there that weren't getting as much coverage, and the police involvement in arresting them and the Patriot Front guys and how they found out about it. One interesting thing I didn't know was maybe I think this might have to do. People were surprised, cops actually taking on white supremacists when usually they're commingling at these events. The Pride event was actually put together by a group where the chief of police or something sits on the board or something. So it was like his event that they needed to take care of. So that was at youtube.com/MattBinder and doomcast.com. And tonight, also at the YouTube channel at 9 p.m. Eastern time, I will be having on both. This is for Scam Economy. I will have on both David Gerard and Amy Castor. Both of them are really great writers and journalists who cover crypto and have been crypto skeptics for longer than it's been cool to be so. And I had them on to discuss their piece that they wrote together about all how they put it, the Jenga blocks that led to what we're seeing right now in the crypto space. We go through all the big failures, whether it's the crypto lenders, the crypto exchanges, the crypto peddlers, all the people who are involved in what's going on right now and why this is happening. That's tonight, youtube.com/Matt Binder. And then after that show, I will be going live to take calls. So definitely tune in.
Amazing. What's happening over on the discourse?
We actually have a new episode coming out tonight about gun violence, our positions on that, and also not our positions on gun violence, although, spoiler alert, I guess we're all against, but also on
Question
some
mark?
of the January question mark, you got to leave a little bit open, to surprise. But also the January 6th committee, I guess, mini-series events, you can call it, the television mini-series event of the month.
Oh, all right. Well, with that said,
should we get to Bitcoin right now?
Without further ado, we got to start off. I think we've been making sure we get to these Bitcoin segments right at the start of the show. So
let's do it. You're speaking my language.
There's always so much to talk about. Like it's it's the future and it moves very fast. So there's always a lot of news.
We got to be current. Anna Delvey, otherwise known as Anna Sorokin, the infamous "Send me the wire." Do it, Bradley.
The wire is wrong.
We should explain to folks who she is.
She was a scammer who posed as a German socialite who tried to open her own social club here in New York City by claiming that her trust fund was overseas, scammed a bunch of wealthy people, also some not so wealthy people too. But the reason that she's in jail is because she scammed wealthy people. This is kind of the Bernie Madoff syndrome.
It was literally like an in-person Nigerian prince scam. Oh, my money is wrapped up overseas. I can't get the hold of it. But if you give me some money now, then I'll be able to give you 3 times that when I get access to my money.
It's VIP.
She's a complex hero figure in my book. Sort of like
I agree with
you. Like the Punisher.
And we should just say she was a subject. She was a subject of a Netflix show.
Yes.
Dramatizing her story.
She's like an anti-hero,
I didn't
right?
care for
If you
that.
say she's like the Punisher, it's like, we need a more dramatized version. That show was terrible. We need a better one where it's like she's like a Tony Soprano or a Don Draper, because complex figure, but you can't help but root for her to some degree. That's how I feel about NYC. No, I can't do it.
New York.
I'm not in practice. The very VIP Anna Sorokin, whose deadpan delivery never fails to make me laugh. She says she's done scamming, no longer going to scam people anymore. She's a changed woman as she zooms in from her detention facility.
ICE detention facility, because she's at risk of being deported.
Yes, I pray that she's not. Oh no, we lost Brandon. I pray that she's not deported, because I want to hear more from her. She stopped scamming, except for the NFTs that she's about to sell.
Boat in south of France.
Sorokin says her time in places like Rikers Island has given her an unexpected passion: politics and criminal justice reform.
It's about finding the perfect balance and solutions for these people who did make mistakes, and how you reintroduce them back into the community. If the law is just too harsh, people will just stop having respect for it.
In the meantime, she has projects she's working on, recently participating in an art show and unveiling a new venture just this week.
And we are creating a Reinventing Anna NFT project.
It's called the Anna Access Card and can be purchased with cryptocurrency. The NFT will unlock things like exclusive live streams or a one-on-one phone call with Sorokin.
I just received so much support, people really going great lengths to get in touch with me. But when people write you a letter when you're in jail, it takes a lot of time out of your day. Just stay connected with people who feel inspired.
My fans.
What do you think people are inspired by?
There's always a way to turn something bad into something good, and I guess I never gave up, and just trying to think in a way too. Anna was like 23, 24, 25, and people should just need to think on themselves back when they were in their mid-20s.
What does the reinvented Anna look like?
Hopefully, I'll be given a chance to like focus all my energy into something legal. I'd love to be given an opportunity to, for people not to just dismiss me as like a quote-unquote scammer, and just see what I'm going to do next.
She found something legal. She found a scam that is legal.
You look poor.
100%.
Yeah, some gray area there. Yeah. No, I first of all, we should say, you said that she's she since scamming. The reason she stopped scamming is because she's been in prison and then held by ICE. It's not like, she dropped it long ago and was just like it all caught up years after she was changed. Like, we don't know what the new Anna Sorokin looks like because she's been in prison. And I will say that if the new Anna Sorokin is looking to get away from this scammer label, her running to NFTs is the first thing to go legit with. Doesn't bode well.
A tiger can't change his stripes. Ah, damn it, I suck. All right, I'm not trying it anymore.
Here's a funny thing that people haven't really been catching on with. I wrote about it earlier today. She's already scammed somebody, actually. You know how she mentioned she had an art show in March in New York City while she was in prison called like Free Anna Delvey.
Mm-hmm.
One of the artists who helped her put it together put $8,000 worth of all the supplies they needed on her credit card with the assumption that she would be paid back by Anna Sorokin and the art exhibitor, like the guy who was putting it together. Which,
sounds like this person deserved to be scammed.
Are you ready for this? That person who put that $8,000 on her credit card, she apparently is most known for her NFT artwork. So it's really full circle here.
And I am fine. And I am fine with that scam happening.
She's complaining now that she hasn't been paid back. It's been like 2 months, and no one they're ghosting her. I'm assuming Anna Sorokin's got other things going on right now, being that she's being held by ICE. But the guy she was working with, who set this all up, owes this woman money apparently, and he's ghosting her too.
What's amazing about her also is from the Vulture piece that the show is based off of. Like when she's first in jail and the reporter interviews her, she's like, "It's fun here. It's like a good sociological experiment." So honestly, I would think she's like, if anything, she might be like having a good time in the detention facility.
Oh yeah, she's loving the attention. This is everything she's ever wanted.
Well, I mean, I think that's the part that sticks out to me because she's not the only famous jailed scammer getting into like the crypto market post-release, because Martin Shkreli is also like starting an NFT or crypto business. And I think they understand more than anybody is that the crypto market is desperate for notoriety, and so any kind of celebrity, even if it's an infamous celebrity that enters into the space in order to like slap their name on a project or put their their fame to good use, is going to be able to properly get a pump and dump scheme out of it, because the market is just like rife with those kinds of scams. And so this will set them apart. They have like a famous person attached to it. All she's missing is like getting on that train with the Jay-Z Jack Dorsey bringing crypto to the hood project.
Yeah.
And then that's
there's a third too, Jordan Belfort.
Naturally. And I heard, I was listening to sports radio this morning, or a sports show, and they were talking about how the host knew some athletes who were hawking crypto and NFTs who got paid in regular dollars and didn't hold any themselves. And I think that might be a minority in terms of some of those. Like, I know Odell Beckham Jr., one of my favorites, decided to get paid last year in crypto, which I don't know how that's working out.
Poorly.
Bad move.
But there are, I would imagine, a lot of celebrities who just they were like, oh, you're going to pay me to promote this product? It's like an influencer thing. I'm going to do it. And what the crypto industry needs right now, as it tanks, is more celebrities commodifying it, because if they want more and more people to pump up the price, they need that kind of cachet. And so, hey, this kind of seems like a perfect fit for her.
Yeah, I also was going to say that people in crypto are fine with it being scams. Like that was the B to the A before. Like people in crypto are fine with getting involved knowingly with scams. Like they'll tell you like, oh, you can make money off a Ponzi scheme. You just have to know when to get out. So it's the perfect ecosystem for people who are known scammers to continue scamming and ideally in their minds get away with it this time because they're still coming in early enough that the regulation hasn't set in where like every particular pump and dump or every particular like influencer scheme is going to, result in some case. They can still like rob a few people, get out. It's the, a lot of marks.
Right. You can make money in a pyramid scheme if you get in early, right?
That's what I was thinking when Matt was talking about the sort of the Jenga of that is crypto. I was like, can you like, make a pyramid scheme out of Jenga blocks? That should be like their whole, that should be their model.
I mean, that's sort of what's going on. Like we're seeing, and we talk about it on the Scam Economy episode that airs tonight. There's a crypto hedge fund called like 3 Arrows, and they currently disappeared because not only have they lost, like they were big time holders of various different cryptocurrencies, including Terra Luna, and they also were lending apparently via Celsius or had Celsius token. That's the crypto lender. That's the other shoe that's dropping right now, that's causing this all to happen. That sort of set off this most recent crash that's happening just weeks after the last crash. And they apparently are under, and then they just lose everything. They owe $1 billion allegedly. The last thing I saw, like they are bad under, and these were guys who were promoting this stuff, and that's the thing. And I mentioned this too on the episode tonight. I strongly think like they knew that this was like they, as in the exchanges, the big holders, they knew something was going to happen much sooner than I think everyone else thought. Because I really do think that whole push during the Super Bowl was more dire than everyone thought. I don't think it was just like, oh, look at us, we're mainstream now. I really think, holy shit, if we don't get more suckers into this right now, because there's no new money coming in.
Yeah. By the way, guys, just before we move on, someone I am, the phone lines are open now. I didn't turn off the voicemail, so call in if you need to. But yeah.
There's a couple angles to that. There's an article on SF Gate by Gabe Fernandez about the Golden State Warriors. We talked about this on Left Reckoning last night, but they started an NFT drop project last April at sort of the height of Ethereum, and it was like they sold a 6-time NBA championship ring for about $1 million NFT. The problem with that is they're about to win their 7th championship, making that 6-time NBA championship NFT thing kind of worthless. But anyway,
we're getting the 7. We're getting Game 7.
But also let's go to the El Salvador of all this, because basically Nayib Bukele has bought a whole bunch of Bitcoin over basically every dip for the past half a year he's bought. They're currently, I'm looking at this Mashable article. Is this written by Binder?
That's me, yep.
Yeah, maybe you can just tell us about this, Matt.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so when I wrote that article a couple of days ago, they had lost approximately 50%, and we should say alleged 50%. And I actually failed to mention this, and Mario Gomez, who is that El Salvadorian Bitcoin critic who got arrested, I had him on Scam Economy. I saw him point this out. This is strictly based on Bukele, the president of El Salvador's tweets about how much they've bought. El Salvador has never made public their wallet, has never actually shown their crypto holdings. This is just based on what Bukele has publicly said. But they had put over $100 million into Bitcoin. And as of right now, every single time they've purchased is right now at a loss. He kept buying the dip, and almost every time it kept on dipping. And then finally this time we're now under every time he's bought, allegedly. And they are now in the hole of more than $50 million. Now, according to them, they're trying to spin it as that's a drop into it's a drop in the bucket for how much their GDP is there or whatever. Yeah, that's basically he gambled away taxpayer money. I mean, this was his like bet. Like El Salvador is not in a good place. They're ready to default on their loans. The IMF is basically telling them that if they want more money. They need to drop this whole silly Bitcoin experiment because it's always only getting them deeper in the hole. And Bukele just decides to get his country further in. I mean, it's sad because it's hurting the people who live there, and these El Salvadorian people. That's one of the most vulnerable countries when it comes to like poverty and the economic situation there.
Yeah, he's invested $100 million basically and got a return of $50 million. And meanwhile, I think you point this out in your article, Binder, 2% of the adult population has been arrested because of violence and different things going on in El Salvador now. So it's not like they couldn't use extra $50 million or $100 million. Got this tweet here from June 14th, if you want to put this up, Bradley. So Bitcoin Magazine just in, this is what Binder's talking about. El Salvador finance minister says $40 million decrease in Bitcoin investment doesn't even represent 0.5% of their national budget. You're telling me, and then Bukele says, you're telling me I should buy more Bitcoin now. I have a response by Omar Argulo, who he's some sort of Bitcoin El Salvador booster. Here's this little video he made. Just so you can see like the people that are running this country as they're jailing 2% of the adult population. Let me go back here.
Oh, buddy.
A little bit of racism to start it off with.
Jesus.
En un gran país tropical que a la vez es pequeño, donde se acepta pero no se recibe, surge el prototipo de presidente, el referente para todo aquel que quiera ser presidente, con un bono de 30, que se puede usar pero no se puede sacar. Así que olvídate si pensabas que el Bitcoin ibas a timar. Bitcoin, 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 Bitcoin.
Jeez. My God.
Bitcoin, 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 tan divino.
So
I also want to add that tweet about how they've only lost 40 mil. Like that was inaccurate. Even when he tweeted it, he was off by at least 10 mil. It hasn't been 40 million in a long time. In fact, let me. I could tell you right now exactly where they're at. It's bad. It's bad. They're down over 53% now. They've lost. If they were to sell today, their $105.6 million cost that they spent on Bitcoin is now only worth 48.8 million. With they're down 56.7 million right now.
It's all part of the plan.
Sheesh.
I mean,
it's very cult-like that whole thing, like the fact that you would keep doubling down on this. It's just like a cult.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brandon. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, yeah, it's like a cult, but that's because it's a pyramid scheme too. So you have to have more people, they see the numbers going down. And so the only solution is to be more excited about the product because that's the only way you can get the number to go back up in their head. But, I think that generally speaking, they've run out of targets for this kind of thing. Like the main target for Bitcoin and NFTs was always going to be like, Reddit libertarian bros who, are interested in technology, maybe in the broad scheme of things like building gaming computers and stuff like that, but aren't quite, coders or programmers to any real degree enough to go through and verify any of this code, to the extent that they can understand it on the smart contracts. And, now that they've run out of those people, they've exhausted that market. Like you said before, like the celebrity Super Bowl ads, crypto.com, Stadium, all those things are to try to pull in the sort of general market into this scam that is just like, it's failing. I mean, it's like trying to get, any of us into LuLaRoe. We were just not the ideal target. And that's why all they can really do is keep using things like it's the future. It's a store of value. It's a hedge against inflation because no one else knows what the shit a blockchain is. No one else is interested in blockchain technology. No one else is really interested in an immutable ledger of anything. Those are just like fake solutions to fake problems that don't exist. That even Anna Delvey's thing is a good example of that. She's like, it's such a hard time keeping up with fans online, such a hard time organizing private shows. Like I can name like three websites right now that can solve that problem, and crypto will do it worse than any of those websites. All it does better is allow you to extract wealth from your audience without the possibility of them getting it back. And so, I think we're just watching the death knell of crypto, and that's why it's such a shame that last week we had 2 senators in this country trying to get people to buy into crypto. Gillibrand and oh my gosh, who was the one from Wyoming?
Loomis
with the laser eyes. Yeah, Loomis were trying to get us to not trying to get us, but trying to get seniors to invest their savings and their sort of pension funds into crypto, because that's just another big store of money that they could they can sort of bring into the market. But I don't think it's going to work. It's just crypto is a very fringe, confusing market.
Yeah. All right, let's the last IM of the day writes in, "Hey, I was the guy last week who disagreed about college ball players. Emma said, and I quote, debate me. I am calling. I have an 813 number. Should I pick up? I'm going to do it. Let me see. I don't know if I see you, dude. 813? Oh, I think I see you. Calling from an 813 area code. Are you the person who wants to debate me?"
Yes, I do want to debate.
Okay. Let's do it.
I am Noah from Tampa. Actually,
Hi, Noah.
I don't actually want to debate. This is just a joke.
Damn it.
You guys are completely right. It's a very paternalistic way.
Come on, Noah.
People.
Wait, you have to explain just really quick. The subject of the debate that ended up not being a debate, Noah, who you totally wanted me to pick up your call and that you tricked me, was
yes, I did.
Yes, you did. Was the concept that college football players, basketball players who make billions for their universities still do not get paid, except if they are star players from now. It's not illegal by the bylaws of colleges to, the Supreme Court made it, invalidated it, basically. If they want to get endorsement deals, they're allowed to. They're allowed to make money off their name, image, and likeness. That's what NIL stands for, but that really only applies to star players, and they still are not guaranteed for injury and stuff like that.
I'll give you the stats to back this up.
Yeah.
So I was looking it up, and the NCAA does keep a little bit of stats on it. They had a randomized study of 500 student athletes, I think, in the last quarter of 2021, and they only found that 125 of those students had any NIL deal at all, and the median was only like $2,000. And as you said, they make billions of dollars. That's not at all fair, and there's no real recourse for those athletes who aren't star players to get
paid for their labor. I mean, it is an absolutely racist and cruel system, 100%.
And as Matt was saying last week, the fact that the boosters are the ones who have the payment is like it means you have.
They
to talk
like
to the
that.
booster.
Yeah, well, they get to feel like big shots in their community, handing out, money to college kids, getting them to play there. And the colleges, nothing happens to their profits. I mean, some of the coaches like Nick Saban are worried because that means that maybe kids are going to go to UCLA or USC versus Alabama versus Mississippi State, where you're in metropolitan areas where there's a lot of commercial value. But a lot of these NIL deals too that kids are getting in Alabama or different schools that are, have huge programs you don't see ads that come out of them based on what we're seeing now. They're just payments from boosters and other people who funnel money to them so that they'll come to their school, and it's no ad for skinny tea comes on their Instagram in the end.
Yeah. I know you guys don't know my background at all, but I have been watching FC football. I've been a fan of the Florida Gators for a long time, and I've followed recruiting for 6-7 years, and it is the dirtiest, craziest thing. The way. And by the way, a lot of these people that follow recruiting are super, super conservative, and it's a bit of a weird dynamic. Hearing these people talk about, athletes who come from really, 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 places that have been created by that racialized history, as the guest was speaking about earlier, and to hear them talk about them as if they're objects. It's the strangest thing. And
well, college football is a relic of slavery and the Jim Crow South. I mean, I know,
Absolutely.
and I know you're a Gators fan. And I'm not judging at all, right? Like, I'm a hockey fan, and there's a ton of racists in there. But that's because I never grew up a college football fan. That's why I don't watch. I'll maybe watch the national championship game, but it's such a disgusting system that it grosses me out.
It is. It's really gross. I mean, nowadays it's even a little bit grosser because it reminds me of like I don't know if this is apps, but like a slave auction. Like there's this website called On3 Recruiting, and they have tabs next to the players about like what their potential NIL deal would be worth, and it's gross.
Yeah. All right. Well, no, I really appreciate the call, even though it was under false pretenses. Noah.
Get dunked on.
All right. Later.
He Sorokin'd his way into the...
I know.
The argument is coming in the wire.
Check your wire.
Maurice the Moose, I just want to say I appreciate the work you do, but one issue I think you may be too harsh on is cryptos. For someone who can speak to its positives, I would recommend reaching out to Cameron Robinson, CEO of Cam Incorporated. He's one of the most successful and dynamic crypto miners in Canada.
No.
And despite a collapse at one of his mines, has ensured Canadians continue to start their day with a well-balanced breakfast. Cryptos, eh? I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
That sounds like a joke, yeah.
If after the consumption of cryptos you notice nausea, dizziness, or weight loss, do not see a doctor. Cam Incorporated is not legally responsible for the effects from consuming cryptos. By reading or listening to this, you agreed to this agreement. All right.
Okay,
Maurice.
you have to watch my stream to know what's going on right now. I have a regular caller who's got a his own little regular thing he does, where he's a crypto miner. He owns a crypto mine, a physical crypto mine in which he uses child labor to physically mine for cryptocurrency.
Oh, that's amazing. Sam's baby cows. Interesting call yesterday. I wonder what caused the caller to get mad at Emma for asking him a question while he was talking to Sam. The caller didn't get mad at Sam for asking a question while he was talking to Emma. Interesting indeed.
Look, Blake's going through it. We pretty much have a clear indication as to why. And the good news is he's found the right place for the arguments that are going to undo that over emphasis on the divorce as for society's ills.
Yes. I feel like it must be broken homes in terms of what caused it. It's backed up by data that I don't have. We should figure out how to legislate something federally to prevent divorce in order to prevent this from happening. I can't think of any other cause. Interesting. Good point. Seems like you're well researched. The Sport Report. We should refer to the Biden administration style of politics as "come on, man" politics. Matt has called it the press release president, which I've borrowed now.
Come on, man.
Southern Socialist. Hey, what's everybody's NBA final predictions? Who you got, Warriors or Celtics?
This is the first time that I feel confident saying I think it's going to be the Warriors, which probably means that Boston's going to win the next two, but
I'm Celtics in 7.
Wow. It is interesting.
For my own interest, though, honestly, because I just want 7 games.
It is interesting. Boston seems a little fatigued based on
for sure.
Steph Curry just exhausts you.
And even if no one else is playing well, or even if he's not playing well, it almost doesn't matter. That's what's crazy about the Warriors, but we'll see.
Mark from PA, Emma, I'll debate your support for a salary cap in sports. Okay. I don't think I would say I support it. I would say I think it depends on the sport, and I want when they do have caps, I want them to be significantly higher.
Yeah, I mean, you could. Well, I don't know. It's so theoretical to think about owners not being involved,
yeah,
and then salary capping. That's who you're capping is the owner doing that. If players, I mean, we're too far to talk about that.
But I don't like the concept of no salary caps and then these capitalist owners moving their selling, and then you just consolidate all these teams in big cities. I like that the Cincinnati Bengals have a team, right? I mean, that's what I think would happen.
Yeah, but there's no salary cap in baseball.
There is none, right?
And there's the Twins and stuff like that, Kansas City Royals.
Yeah.
That's also because MLB owners are basically engaging in a capital strike where they don't spend any of their money. So it doesn't even really matter that they don't have a salary cap.
That's also a good point. Calling from a 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 702.
Hey, everybody. It's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas.
Bro Flamingo. What's on your mind?
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm all right. Missed you guys.
You too.
Okay, well, I'll start off with this. Because, I haven't called in a while. The Uvalde shooting. The Uvalde shooting in January 6th hearings. Because, Emma, you even brought this up with David Griscom, but I just kind of want to him on this point. There are still lefties who downplay the January 6th riots.
Yeah.
Whether it's school points, whether it's saying like, oh, well, those are both the enemies and blah, blah, blah. And it's very disturbing to me because especially when the January 6th committee released those videos and you got like a big glimpse, you actually got like an inside glimpse. It was more terrifying than people thought it was. But also, like, there's like these types on the left who are like, oh, this has nothing to do with us, whatever. But these are the fascists and white supremacists and neoconservatives running around and the Christian nationalists running around, doing a coup attempt. Those are your direct political enemies. Those aren't like, some alt-right guy. No. Those guys are going to action and trying, to implement what their vision of the United States is, which is basically, for example, the final solution to the Negro question, to the woman question, to the Hispanic. It doesn't matter. So that's a very serious thing. And that kind of annoyed me. That really annoyed me a little bit. But I also do think that the Democrats are also dropping the ball on this. At the end of the day, look, okay, I get it. Joe Biden and the Democrats, they're politically inept, great. But the one thing you should be able to do is to punish the political enemies and be messaging that political punishment. Because political punishment of your enemies does galvanize people to the polls. Of course, I want decommodified healthcare. I want all that.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen. He's weak. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Emma.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I said, yeah, go on.
Okay. So, I really do think, like, at the end of it, I'm not sure what's going. Well, I do know what's going on. There's still, like, this insane kind of, like, fossilized, there's good Republicans. No, they're not. And also another thing too, I think somebody else said that. I apologize, I can't reference it, but he said you have to tie the Republicans like it's one thing to punish like the Ham and Eggers and the white supremacists in the crowd. Okay, I get all that. They need to be punished to the maximum. But the leaders, you know what I'm saying? You need to start pointing fingers like, oh no, this guy over here who's sitting next to me in Congress, help these guys.
I think that was Matt and my emphasis when we covered it last Friday when Sam was out. Because it's I go after the Proud Boys, go after all the people on the ground involved, but I am uncomfortable with the breathless inclusion of and forefronting of Liz Cheney, because it undercuts the understanding that this is the Republican Party. This is the Republican Party.
No, absolutely. And the thing is, too, it's like and also, and last thing, and I'll jump. But the weird thing about Liz Cheney is that she still has that kind of brand recognition, and she's just like, how can I put this? She's almost just like the perfect kind of straw man for Republicans. Like, look at this good Republican over here. You know what I'm saying? She just perfectly positioned herself. But it's like, I'm old enough to remember when when the change are relevant, but they're not even really relevant anymore. There's no political juice there. You're just talking to five Republicans in Upper East Side somewhere or something. Who cares? Okay, but that's why I don't understand why they forefront Liz Cheney or forefront any Republicans. All I want is tough talk and punishment for these people, honestly. Because at the end of the day, look, we're not going to get the health care. We're not get $10,000 in Sleepy Joe bucks for
student loans,
educational leave. Yeah, but at the end of the day, at a minimum, I'm asking for competence. It's like, hey, punish these political enemies, because you will galvanize people. We all want other things, but at the end of the day, it's politics 101. Love you guys. Left is best. Take care.
Appreciate it, Bro Flamingo. Well said. Yeah, that is what I want to. And I think the January 6th committees are a good thing for the negative partisanship reasons. Do I think that they are capitalizing in the way to go after the Republican Party and behaving like an opposition party in the way that they should, as opposed to just making it about Trump. I do not think they're doing that effectively enough.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the fear has always been the same. And, it tracks back to the fear and the inability to prosecute Trump for any of his many crimes, during the presidency, before the presidency, after the presidency. And it's just
inability to prosecute Bush after what he did. It's the same thing.
There's just like a fear of, less of a slippery slope, but the idea of there is going to be accountability, that the wave of accountability is going to start. And, it might start with the far right, the individual soldiers who are marching on the Capitol. But that will eventually lead you to like the far right thought leaders, the people who not just the YouTubers who are getting their clicks and likes from like stoking up racial animosity and sort of anti-government rhetoric. Well, I guess anti-government rhetoric is fine, but far right demagoguery, but the Tucker Carlsons, and then it goes into the mainstream media, and like the people who want to pretend or who view Tucker Carlson as reprehensible but still their colleague and peer are afraid that, well, yeah, if we start punishing people just for lying on the news in order to build an audience, how will that affect my bottom line as a liberal pundit at New York Times? Like I'd rather hate to say it, like Congress is a series of colleagues who work together, who view each other as professional peers who they owe more responsibility to than the public, as well as the obvious monetary incentives to behave that way. So, it becomes difficult to determine how much of it is like people ideologically thinking that bipartisanship is right versus people just like paid to pretend that. But the result is the same, which is that we have a Democratic Party, who proclaims that they are the best, last, only hope to stop fascism from finally taking over this country, as represented by the Republicans, who are also their best friends and dear colleagues, who you should never do anything too, mean to, like yell at in public, because that might set a bad precedent for them. And that's just an unworkable situation. Some of the January 6th thing, the committee and even before the committee was like, yeah, but some of it is like you're just complaining about your friends, and we can't save Democratic lawmakers from their friends in this sense, especially when they're going to put their friends and their the money that they can make with their friends over the public.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When I had a show the night of that first primetime January 6th committee hearing. And some people asked me, look, why weren't you covering it live? And one of the reasons why I decided not to was just, I'll be honest, I was not expecting for them to put out such a well, at least the video packages in terms of the timeline of things. I thought that was very well done. And I did watch that night live on the stream. But I also think like and that was, what I thought came to fruition just a couple of days later when they said they're not going to be recommending any sort of action on the DOJ. Like it's up to the DOJ to decide to do something. It's like, listen, no matter how well this is put together, if they're not seeking anything from it, then this whole thing is pointless. Like if they're not looking to actually make
I don't know if it's pointless, Binder. I do think it's good electorally. I think that they need this negative partisanship.
Oh,
Definitely.
Sure. Okay. That's a good point.
And I think,
yes.
Just to your point, Matt, real quick, but I think that's the only action they're recommending, that like you go out there and vote to get these people out of office, which is not really an option for most people.
So that's my thing. That's a great point, Emma and Brandon. Yeah. So it's not, it's not completely pointless in that sense, but in terms of like directly holding people to account for what happened, it's like, that's sort of what that's sort of what, gets me sort of bothered by this.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It's like, it's like, why are we just going after the guys who were duped to go down there? And, they're already brainwashed by QAnon or whatever. And don't get me wrong, they should be held to account too. But if it's just them and not the guys who had the actual plots and plans, like sure, some Proud Boys and some Oath Keepers will probably get a slap on the wrist or whatever, or, actually maybe even spend some, time in jail or whatever. But they're still like, if that's the highest we go, then that's still not high enough. That's still not high enough.
Exactly. But that's by design, because they're the population of people who, benefited or who were present or who were complicit that can be most easily extricated from that larger block of people who have power. So like putting them in jail won't implicate, the people who told them to go down there. It won't implicate the people who told them to, go into the building, who prevented them from actually the lack of law enforcement there to prevent them from getting that far. Those decisions are going to be like left sort of to the voters to decide whether anything should be done about that. The people who can just have been said to like maybe have been confused or just like, rank and file foot soldiers for Proud Boys, like they're convinced that they're going to be protected as patriots, what we've seen in the aftermath of them like being surprised they were taken in. But for the most part, they're just going to be disavowed by all the people who sent them down there. They're going to be told that like, oh, I never heard of a based shaman. That's fake. That's fake news. And Democratic Party is willing to let that go. And it just ruins this. Ruins the lives of the people, the smallest at the ruins a lot of the people at the bottom. But at the same time, those people's presence there is often used as an excuse to justify why it wasn't like a fascist protest. It's like, the inclusion of people who may or may not be there for like a legitimate quote unquote free speech rally or a legitimate whatever kind of like far right adjacent rally are used as a shield from not only just like actual fascists who are there to like spread fascism, but the people who make their money off of those fascists and those kinds of protests. And so like those are people we need to be going after, the core of fascists and the core of people who make money off of fascism, and not like necessarily just the people who they basically insulate themselves with as like confused American citizens, like confused patriots, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this
but
was
also,
Go ahead,
also on your both your points too, and I still agree with it in terms of like, yeah, it's good to get some people to see this, so like hopefully they actually, that's the hope that they go out and actually vote. But also that could backfire in the sense that like, if those people whose minds are being opened or they are seeing this stuff for the first time, obviously these aren't the most of political people if this is the first time they're seeing this. So in a sense, if at the end of the committee hearings and everything, nothing comes out of it, then those people could also just end up assuming, oh, I guess the case to make against them just wasn't there. Like, obviously, if there was, then these people would get in trouble. So why am I going to get riled up by this if there was nothing there to charge them with or anything?
Yeah.
No, it's a vicious cycle. And I think it's that point too. It also, even if you don't think of it as they did nothing wrong, you definitely get the opinion that Democrats are useless, which even if you do go out and vote for them and they end up with a majority in the House and the Senate and then the presidency, and they somehow manage to add people to the Supreme Court, they might still, and we've seen this in the past, under Obama in the first 2 years, they might still just refuse to bring charges against the Bush administration. They might still refuse to pass laws that improve the general state of welfare of most Americans, and all that's going to do is suppress vote in the next election, which when we talk about the midterms coming up, the people are going to dismiss Biden and Democrats' inability to get things done through a series of excuses that just don't matter for most people who are actually trying to like get by paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And so like that sort of apathy or being completely feckless about actually following through on their promises has meaning for people who actually rely on them to maybe make the world a better place.
It's all the Democrats have at this point is the negative partisanship. So I mean, I'm fine with them taking what they have, but to your point, they on the delivering for people front, they've really got nothing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a disconnect with the electoral thing. I mean, I think there's a use for like trying to get some semblance of the stuff on the public record, even outside the electoral stuff. But like the electoral stuff, there's a disconnect because I remember the Trump impeachment stuff. And it's like, okay, we did all these hearings, and now we wait for public opinion to scare senators. I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
The Senate was specifically set up so that doesn't happen. That's why they wait 6 years. They don't give a fuck. And like, and there's never, and it was good for their campaigns though, right? Like it juiced anti-Trump sentiment was extremely useful. But like this idea where it's like now we wait for you to do this thing, then make it accountable. Well, if you really believe that, the way we have accountability in a system would be elections, I can be on board with that. One thing I would do would be to make it a fucking holiday. We've had Democrats with full control of the houses how many times since we've been alive?
Yeah.
And they've not done that.
Nope.
They don't expand the electorate.
They don't want that many working people voting.
Their plan is to out-organize voter suppression. And what that means is like we'll get our fucking suburbanites who we really want to show up for us.
And that's why they emphasize Liz Cheney.
And so that like it's all neutered. Like we want the electorate to come save us, but the electorate is like, I mean, maybe they can suburban it up to people give a shit enough about this sort of stuff. Like that'd be wonderful, but I don't think it's ever going to happen.
I will say also they support arming the police force to the degree that if you do show some kind of like anger in public about voter suppression, these right-wing states can just use all the money coming from the federal government to like send a militarized police force after you. And so it just becomes one of those, like, again, a vicious cycle where they have to be allowed to appeal, or these Democrats have to be allowed to appeal to like this theoretical suburban mom voter who is open to voting Democrat every time, never quite does it, but is open to it very time because sometimes she professes to not like, a la Joe Rogan's friend, not like how homophobic the Republican Party is. They never secure this vote, but they do manage in pursuit of this quote, either, as a lie to cover their own political and material interests or like in just ideological obsession with them. They do manage to lose working voters. They do manage to lose people of color voters. They do manage to lose young voters, but it's just clear that they just overvalue this suburban mom archetype of voter well above all others. And it's just, it's just going to lead to a large portion of this country continuing to be run by far right demagogues until like the Democratic Party either wakes up or until some alternative political strategy to combat fascism at the highest scale arises.
Yep. All right, let's move on to this Candace Owens clip here. So Candace Owens is leaning full into transphobia, much like other people who are minorities in the right-wing ecosystem. Dave Rubin also comes to mind. She feels the need to overcompensate and go harder on her hatred as a way to retain her audience. This is in response to a dubious New York Post report that says that over $200,000 has been spent on drag shows at New York City schools. I don't really know if that figure is accurate. I don't particularly care. I'm sure it's like some sort of gay pride events that have been happening at New York City schools. I think that's a great thing. I think that's a great thing, and it makes me happy that I live in this city. And so, I mean, Candace Owens is obviously horrified. Here she is advocating for parental choice, parental rights. Just kidding. The state to take away people's kids if they attend these kinds of drag shows.
Our society has become increasingly disgusting. I spoke about this last week. And when you start to see that your government is sponsoring that, when they're putting real dollars behind things like Drag Queen Story Hour in New York City, you should realize that something nefarious is going on, because the government does not care about your children. No, the government does not love your children. The government does not want your children to be accepted. The government wants your children to be enslaved to government for the rest of their life. And right now, as we're seeing,
can you pause it for a sec? I just really quickly, you don't even need to take it down. Yeah. When she says enslaved there, that's the kind of overcompensating that I am trying to highlight. Just pay attention to that, because it's not subtle, but for her audience, it hits all their pleasure buttons.
Children, the government does not want your children to be accepted. The government wants your children to be enslaved to government for the rest of their life. And right now, as we're seeing, there is a marriage between government and big pharma. It is my belief that that is the push behind this effort to tell children that they can pick their gender and to confuse them. I believe our government is actually sponsoring mental illness. I've said this over and over again, right? Because people that are mentally ill cannot stand up on their own 2 feet, right? They become codependent with the government. They turn to the government for their hormone pills. They turn to the government for whatever pills that they can to make it feel better, right? And you are seeing right now that adults are getting behind this narrative so that they can have a woke t-shirt on and say, I love my children. I allow my child to pick their gender and pick their species. And they feel proud of themselves because they can go and they can say this on Facebook that they're a wonderful, accepting and loving adult, when in reality, they are underqualified to have children. They should have their children taken away from them because it's child abuse.
Okay. So,
pick their own species. Can you catch that one? Just trying to make it so ridiculous. Yeah.
So when she's doing a lot of things here. The big pharma thing is interesting to me because Candace Owens has been, in the past few months, attempting to shoehorn anti-trans bigotry into a variety of news stories. Binder reported on the false conspiracy theory spread on 4chan and other right-wing forums that Candace Owens and Representative Paul Gosar picked up, claiming that the Uvalde mass shooter was trans. That's not true. Circulating photos of trans women and pretending that that was the mass shooter. Candace Owens fanned the flames of that conspiracy theory and refused to apologize because she wants to connect, as she mentions there, mental illness, mental health, which, by the way, the right wing has no proposal to address mental health because they don't believe in decommodifying healthcare, which Medicare for All, other programs like that would be a step towards that. They don't actually, it's just a red herring. They don't really care about mental health. They just say that as a way to say trans people are mentally unwell. Mentally unwell. It's a disease to be trans. So that's part of it there too. When she says the government does not care about your children, that's another way that she's trying to shoehorn a variety of right-wing ideas into this anti-trans bigotry. It's trying to be symbiotic. The government can't care for your children. This is why we have to defund public education. This is why teachers' unions are bad. That's the second way that she's trying to link all of these things together. And the third one, which I had not heard before, is the big pharma point. That transitioning, that gender-affirming care, because it involves hormone therapy, much like vaccines, is how the Democrats are in bed with big pharma. Now, that's a new way. That's a new avenue that I have not heard yet, but it makes sense. It makes sense that they'll go down that road. Intersectionality on the right is just like the intersection of all the ways that they hate people and how they can connect those things together.
No, absolutely. And I just looked up the budget for New York City. I didn't pull this number for New York
it's
State.
38 billion.
It's like 40 billion. And so like even if they did spend like $200,000 on drag story hour
over several years.
Over several years. But even if they spent it all in 2021, it would be like 0.0005% of the budget. You know, I mean, compared to how many, like what they spend to keep like cops in schools or stuff like that, I can only imagine. But
they just cut the school, Mayor Adams just cut the school budget here for next year by a couple $100 million in order to fund more policing. And his way of spinning that is we just reallocated the funds. We didn't cut it. Even though you literally took it from the education budget. But you don't see the conservatives complaining about that. Just the $200K over a course of many years. That's the one to really be concerned about. That's where the waste is, not the hundreds of millions of dollars being cut for next year.
And I'm sorry, but like the drag queen storytime thing is eminently defensible as a learning experience for kids. Like, first of all, you're sending a message to kids that are maybe trans or maybe non-binary that, hey, this is sort of accepted. But also, just from a standpoint of, hey, a different sort of person is reading me where the wild things are in a way that, in a more exciting way that's actually engaging my imagination. And there's a whole bunch of different sort of things that I'm interrogating now that, like, it's defensible. And, like, I'm sorry that certain parents want to protect their kids from that. Candace Owens and all these freaks that want the law to step in, it's absolutely insane. It's insane that these freaks have been able, with the help of sympathetic folks in media, portrayed themselves as the one that are fighting like state authority and censoriousness, when that's of course what they're doing. This is a moral panic against, frankly, things that they should be. It's 2022, folks.
I also can't stress this enough, but like kids, I remember seeing this photo. I said this on the show, I think last week or the week before, but like no one is saying this about kids when they go to like Hooters for their birthday party and take pictures with Hooters waitresses, or when they're on their prom photos and like a dad's like, "Watch out, kid, I'm armed." Like,
I'll shoot you if you come near my daughter.
Yeah, it's like, he knows to be careful. It's like, oh yeah, like those are fine values, right? That's cool as long as it's straight women and men threatening to murder their partners if they cross a line, so called.
Yeah, no,
so, that's fine. That's fine.
And I can't stress this enough. I know somebody whose daughter loves Drag Race because it is colorful, it is fun, and it is like theatrical. It's the equivalent of seeing a Broadway show with your kid, and the only reason that these people are, conservatives like Candace Owens are making this into a moral panic is because they hate trans people. Period.
It's
and
also
they're bigoted.
It also tells a lot, and you could even throw the Hooters
And
thing
I'm
in
sorry,
here.
I'm sorry, Binder. I didn't mean to cut you off. I don't want to conflate trans people with drag, people who dress in drag.
All of it to those kids, and honestly, to most adults who aren't friggin' weirdos, that stuff's not sexual. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's just people doing, just dressing in cross-dressing is not a sexual act. Just
Also,
being a woman and wearing a revealing outfit alone is not a sexual act. It's just not.
Also, I mean, I just feel like even at the base of what they're asserting when they say they care about children is, I think, false in the sense, and damaging, and we've talked about many times on the show, because it implies that at some point parents are going to either teach their kids sex ed appropriately, or they are going to support curriculum at some age, some indiscriminate age. Who knows? They always say, like, just older, later. They are going to support curriculum that teaches children, not just teaches children, but teaches children how to be adults who can have healthy, sustainable, nonviolent sex lives. And we're just not an adult population that has that even widespread. So I think that it's unfortunate that parents across the board usually are trying to assert that they just adults somehow you become at an age randomly equipped with knowledge that you need in order to have like a healthy, vibrant, fun, I'll say it fun, I know some people don't think it should be fun, but fun sex life, that they are going to somehow equip their kids with it, when we know it just won't happen. Like plenty of adults are still confused by consent, consent negotiations. Plenty of adults shy away from using words like penis and vagina because it makes them feel like weird and like icky. It's like we don't have a very mature adult population when it comes to being able to discuss sex or intimacy or consent. And we're trying, the people who are most, I hate to say it, but are most exemplified by that are trying to rob not only their children of a future where they can better describe their own desires and their own anxieties and even what has happened to them in terms of sexual violence. They want to rob not only their children of that, but they want to rob the entirety of our next generation of being able to say, like, yeah, you know what, we as a generation are better, maybe not better at everything, but we're certainly better at discussing sex, better at discussing sexuality, better at discussing like boundaries and limits and consent than our parents were. It's just this sort of, this kind of myth that parents are inherently experts in child rearing from at all levels of child rearing, and also in terms of every like specific thing you might want to rear a child in, and that it can't be exported to the state or some sort of outside actor because it has to be inside the nuclear family. Otherwise, it's somehow illegitimate or invalidates it. And it's just like, no, I agree. I think school should be a place where people are taught better habits than their parents are able to teach them. That's like the whole point of school. But some Republicans just want it to be a place where where they turn your child into an
adult version of you, where it's the narcissism that you display is reflected into your child, your incuriousness, frankly, why I say narcissism is those kinds of parents are so insecure that they are uncomfortable with their child reflecting anything that isn't just exactly them back at them. And that is a bad parent. Conservatives want parents to be bad, hateful parents that drive their kids to suicide, to self-harm, to hating themselves. That's what they want.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a good experiment would be to see just the general level of sex education amongst American adults, and then especially amongst people who are against sexual education. Because, we just can't allow, just from a public health standpoint, an entire generation of kids to grow up, homophobic, transphobic, because it leads to suicide, leads to depression rates. We can't allow them to become obsessed with abstinence-only education because it leads to drug-resistant strains of STDs.
Yeah.
But there is no sense that this might be a public health issue amongst people who view every issue as an individualistic issue, especially once you start talking about like children and their children, and they're just property that they should be allowed to mold in any way they want.
And they get to undercut public education in the process. So. Yeah. Total win-win for the conservative movement.
The state needs to step out of the way while I raise my kids, unless other parents disagree with my personal morals, and then the state needs to step in and take away those kids from those parents.
Yep.
Of course. Yeah.
Let's do this AOC thing because I actually want to unpack this a little bit. Sorry, we're going to do rapid fire clips because I realized we didn't really get to many yet. All right. So here's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez responding to one of the videos released by the January 6th committee, which shows a Capitol rioter threatening, or at least mentioning AOC by name in a threatening manner. I was told by some substackers and some right-wingers that it was hysterical of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to be afraid that she was going to be sexually assaulted on January 6th. Well, here she is responding to that and connecting it to Republicans and her Republican colleagues, which is a welcome connection in my book.
Your personal reaction to being named in the threat included?
I mean, I think it's been very clear for a very long time that I work with people who wish me harm, who wish me physical harm, who wish me political harm, who wish me harm. And it's not just Representative Loudermilk. You have many members of Congress who have specifically used my name to incite violence. And this has been happening well before the 6th, and many people experience the 6th in very different ways. I experienced it as a culmination of the violent rhetoric, not a first time or a one-time spike in violent rhetoric.
Again, we've been...
I mean, and so this is a part of a pattern. AOC was targeted by right-wingers and continues to be. I appreciate that she didn't mince words there. They exploit knowingly the angry, sexually repressed, confused response from the base when they see her, and she makes them confused and angry and they find her attractive. I mean, I'm just speaking frankly, but it creates a culture, a rape culture surrounding her in Republican discourse. And you saw that this reflected in when she was speaking out about abolishing ICE. The ICE Facebook groups had cartoons rather of her being sexually assaulted that they were disseminating very vulgar, horrible things, and that is a direct result of Tucker Carlson and also her colleagues, Republican colleagues, who stoke this violence against her. She was 100% right to fear for her life. If I was her, and to fear for being assaulted, that was something I thought during the riots that we were seeing, the insurrection attempt, the coup attempt, I think is the term that we prefer to use here. Like, I was like, damn, they are going to maybe rape Ilhan Omar and AOC or attack them. I mean, and that was before she said anything about that. And so I think we need to be very clear-eyed about the kind of violence that is being promoted in right-wing circles and what that means for women of color who are these representatives, what that means for women of color who are not representatives downstream in people's communities, and, you know, what it takes to be someone like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in this system right now.
And just for some context, also from the video, that video in question she's talking about is the one that was we watched yesterday, Emma, of the Loudermilk tour guy on the tour who his remarks walking towards the Capitol. He says there's no escape for Pelosi, Schumer, Jerry Nadler, and then says he says even you, AOC, we're coming to take you out. So, like, a lot of people on, you know, there are certain, of course, across the spectrum, you know, I mean, we can talk about a certain person who is probably more of a libertarian actually than a leftist, but is saying that that's overblown. But like, what does that guy have to lose from saying that? Like, what do we think he's lying? Do we think he would? Do we think, given the opportunity, he wouldn't have done that? No. Are we giving that much credence to that guy that he's just blowing smoke while walking to the Capitol to protest, to riot, to protest an election result?
We have visual evidence via photography taken from January 6th inside the House chambers and such of literally Republicans hiding in fear, people who are ostensibly on Trump's side, who this violent, angry mob of MAGA people would have seen and said, "Hey, come and join us." Yet they were hiding too because they were afraid of these people. So number one, there's that. And then number two, it's really interesting to see how, like, literally people physically breaking into AOC's place of work and loudly proclaiming they were coming after her while brandishing various different objects which could be used as weapons.
They had
while also having
gallows.
real weapons. Yeah,
They had gallows.
yes, that's over the top. That's AOC being a drama queen or something. Yet a certain shitty Twitter account, Libs of TikTok, gets a few DMs from what I uncovered were a few of them were from her own followers and supporters who thought they were being edgy jokesters and didn't realize that Libs of TikTok wasn't going to get the jokes they were trying to send her. Literally, she posts a few screenshots of people saying some mean stuff to her in the DMs. Like, literally anyone with a Twitter account and a large amount of followers gets on a regular basis, myself included. And you got some of those same people who poo-poo on AOC's very real fears going, "This is abhorrent. Look what it's like to be a woman on the internet living in fear." Give me a break. Give me a break.
You know,
TikTok. Go ahead, Brandon.
No, I was gonna say, I think you all make great points, but what I want to make sure it doesn't get buried is, the real epidemic of violence in our society, cancel culture. Because, while it's possible that any number of, and I will say, I think people conflate two things when it comes to the Capitol riot, insurrection, storming, whatever you want to call it, is that, like, the ability for the rioters to overthrow the election results of 2020 with the ability of the rioters to actually kill or individually harm any individual member of our government, each other, any innocent bystander, and the inability, rather the unlikely nature that they would be able to do the former being used to completely disregard the complete realistic threat of the latter, which is that a bunch of people could have died. People did die. Less people than could have died, but a lot more people could have died. And it can embolden more events like this, where even if our government continues to sort of truck along as the zombie neoliberal government it is, more people will continue to die at higher levels due to these kinds of things. To the point about cancel culture, I think it's a strategic thing that they're only interested in the quote unquote type of violence online that might result in them losing their platform or them being unable to sell subscriptions, and that any critique of that platform or what they do with it is grouped into a bucket called like cancel culture, and it's just the woke mob trying to tear people down for their opinions, and a complete disregard for any sort of stochastic terrorism or, in this case, if you believe what people say about a lot of people at the riot or at the insurrection being like confused or misled, just the ability for people with platforms, large platforms, to mislead people into getting themselves in a substantial amount of trouble or harm's way by being irresponsible with that platform. And so the cancel culture conversation is meant entirely to disrupt conversations about the real violence that occurs as the result of people inappropriately and, immorally using their platform to stoke violence, either for ideological reasons or for money. And I think that, as we move into the sort of Capitol riot committee, more and more people are going to pretend as though like there should be no consequences, or that the consequences should stop with the people at the riot who are going to be going to jail for it, and that we shouldn't look into the very real, essentially very real ecosystem of an economy of far-right content creators that exists entirely to stoke up these kinds of events, and then to distance themselves from it and go like, I can't believe this happened. I'm not responsible for the things I say. And if you say I am, that's just cancel culture,
Stochastic terrorism is viewed by many more Republicans, elected Republicans, than makes most people comfortable as collateral damage for their kind of success. If it's not actively fomented by people like Tucker Carlson.
I mean, Candace Owens literally laughed in the face of being mentioned by somebody who just massacred a whole bunch of folks.
Yeah.
I think Ben Shapiro's had the same sort of glibness about it.
Chaya Raichik's entire existence.
Yeah.
It's just the cost of doing
Thanks
business.
for
And I
naming
think
her.
a lot of, it's just the cost of doing business for those people. And I think a lot of people who work in media, but even don't find themselves aligned with the political objectives of those people, either, ostensibly or in reality, are willing to allow for that to be the case, that like they should be allowed to stoke up this kind of unrest. They should be allowed to stoke up the kind of violence, because tackling it in any way might lead to, eventually them to come after me, the good writer at the New York Times, and wonder why I don't quote my stuff. And that, it's a really, really unreasonable, personalized anxiety that a lot of people in media and politics have about their own positionality there. But I would highlight how AOC and a lot of those Congress people and senators felt about the far right mob coming to get them. I would highlight, what happened to that far right mob by our far right police state after they were allowed to get that far without being told what they were doing, if you believe them, was sufficiently wrong to get in trouble. Is that like the people who are going to suffer are always going to be the people who think they're insulated from this kind of thing. Like they're going to be the first ones who suffer because they're the ones who are, on the ground. They're the ones who are going to be, in the building when the far right storms or in that far right crowd. And the people who told them to be there are going to be like on the news that night saying, I had nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bradley, you named you said Libs of TikTok's name, right there. If we're gonna do that, we need to.
Chaya Raichik.
Well, we need to say it right. Come on, guys. It's a Jewish name. It's Chaya Raichik. I mean, we gotta say it right.
Sorry.
Say it. Come on, everyone, say it together now. Chaya Raichik.
Chaya Raichik.
Yeah,
there you go.
TikTok.
I just want to say, good that Chaya Raichik was banned, is my understanding. Good. I think
Really?
this sort of
No, she was one of those things where delete
Okay.
this tweet and we'll let you come back on. And after a couple days, she deleted it.
I just want to say this fatuous line that in order to like be able to like call Israel an apartheid state, for instance, you also need to accept like hate coordination on a social media platform. I'm done with that free speech bullshit. Like I as somebody who believes in free speech, I think like you also need to stop hate campaigns from being coordinated on your platforms. And I think Libs of TikTok is exactly that. I think anybody who's apologized for Libs of TikTok is despicable. And I think good riddance to Libs of TikTok if we can finally just ban it for life.
Yep. All right, let's do one more clip. Let's do one more clip. We got to get to it. Sorry, guys. All right. I am fascinated by this and also a little worried. You guys see The Big Short?
Of course.
Yeah? Okay.
This reminds me exactly.
There's
of that
literally
animal,
a
by the
scene
way.
in this that is where these guys are Florida real estate brokers, basically, bragging about how many people they're signing up for houses, and it doesn't matter what their credit is, and that they were I was a bartender, and now I own a boat. That's these guys. We have another housing bubble on our hands, and I just want to get ahead of this and be careful, because I think that there's something coming down the pike.
So I thought I was doing a lot. I had 60 rental properties and about $10 million in real estate owned. But wait 1 minute. Got 242 units, $32 million in real estate. Boom.
2,500 units, 175 million.
Boom.
Sorry, just to step in there. They skip a guy, and it I don't know if he does not own any proproperties, but
Maybe he comes back.
No, he doesn't. The camera lingers over this guy, and it's like, nope, we're gonna skip over you.
No,
to the
he's
property owners.
He's not. He doesn't own the
He doesn't own
millions of
shit.
property.
Well, watch the second guy that they
Yeah.
But wait 1
He
minute.
owns one house.
Got 242 units, $32 million in real estate. Boom.
2,500 units,
Now that guy.
175 million.
Boom.
220 houses, 25 million.
Boom.
About 1,500 units, 45 million.
Boom.
4,288 units, $335 million.
Boom.
So there's no way to verify those figures, but given what I have read about venture capital buying up a ton of real estate, lots of properties, driving up prices, rent prices also being driven up by capitalists, owners, buying all these homes, driving up prices and driving up rents. There's certainly we interviewed somebody maybe a year ago about the commercial real estate bubble that is percolating. I also am think that there's a housing bubble that
No, I agree.
is on the way of bursting. Yeah, and like that is I mean, if that's not evidence of that douchey TikTok. I don't really know what is.
No, I actually literally got an ad on YouTube while I was watching a completely. Actually, no, I was watching a video for crypto, and so that's probably why it was targeted towards me, because it's like that seems like the exact same kind of you know ocean you'd be fishing for, like these kinds of scams. That ad was advertising a course on how to buy multi-unit apartment buildings as a way to get like cheap or quick fast money. And I was like, is this the new scam to become like not just like a micro landlord, but to like buy a whole multi-unit building? And when they were going through like what they were owning, it seemed like a lot of them were owning like apartments or some sort of thing. Like they refer to them as units versus houses. So I can see, this is the new scam. This is the new scam. People are putting all their crypto bucks into buying up land.
And you wonder why people have resentment towards landlords and people who charge and increase rent for like maintenance when they come in and change a light bulb twice a year and maybe fix a sink. Like a lot of this is passive income for people, and they're able to accumulate. Yeah, they're able.
That's all they care about it for.
Yeah, I mean they're on what? They're at a resort and they're bragging about the millions and millions of dollars that they have in holdings, and there is no way that this is going to be sustainable, especially since housing prices have been increasing since 2012 and accelerating at a degree these past 2 years that is the result of large firms, capitalists, venture capital buying up all these homes and driving up prices.
I mean, maybe housing is a durable investment, and like these are just slumlords. This is what a slumlord is, and those folks there are why there are homeless people. Like that's exactly why. Like those, and the amount of when they talk about, oh yeah, I got this many millions, that many millions. Guess what they do? They buy politicians with that. And then they say, oh, and then you get in the way of new housing, you get in the any kind of developments, you control those too. And does anybody look at any of those guys there, at fucking Margaritaville and think that they're really like putting in time with their units, making sure that like it's up to code, it's all safe,
making sure, in terms of like the credit too, or right.
Do we even know if these are like long-term leases, or are these just like Airbnbs that they're renting? Like, half of these units are being left open to Airbnb.
We don't know.
Because like that's why a lot of that real estate got bought up, because both Zillow had their thing, and then a lot of like micro Airbnb landlords like had to sell off their property at the beginning of the pandemic when Airbnb was unable to like keep them liquid.
Right.
Like the value of those homes though, like they haven't actually paid that. That's like they all got mortgages that they're paying off, I'm sure, loans and stuff. Like the question is like, why does everyone just stop paying their rent? What are these guys gonna do? They're all gonna default. They're all gonna go bankrupt and have to foreclosed on. They don't own this stuff. These guys are clearly new money. Old money does not make videos like this showing off in that sense. These guys got no idea what they're doing, even in the sense of like this scummy world to begin with. They're just like the new breed of like TikTok investors. The whole, and it really does, you're absolutely right, Brandon, overlap with the whole crypto mentality too. The whole idea of quick money. And if you're not rich, you're just not hustling hard enough, even though what these guys are doing is actually the most like lazy scams on the planet. They're not actually doing any actual laborious hard work. It's all overlapping there, and it's all this new get rich quick mentality, and these guys are gonna be screwed, I'm sure, when the shit hits the fan, because they don't outright own those properties, trust me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what makes them like crypto bros too, because they've been convinced that like being a landlord is a guaranteed passive return on your investment. And just like when we saw with the beginning of the COVID pandemic happened, when a lot of landlords were forced for even a half of a second to take a break on collecting rent from people who were unemployed, that a lot of them are illiquid. They're just sitting there going like hoping that the money comes in every month, because they're not quote unquote good business people planning ahead. They're just, parasites. like, on working Americans trying to like live and survive in a society that is not pretty much geared towards helping people do that. I think the interesting part is that we know like when that stuff collapses for people like that, we're going to get a different TikTok video explaining why they deserve people. Like once this passive income scam falls out from under them and they've decided that they deserve to be rich, they'll just be, coming to the government telling that they deserve to be bailed out for all of these income properties that are going unrented.
Yeah. All right, let's take one more call, and then we are going to read some IMs, and then we're going to get out of here because I have to leave and go to a wedding. One of my best friends is getting married. Her name is Christy. Everybody say congratulations. Yay.
Congratulations, Christy.
Yay.
I love her. I'm so excited.
VIP.
Yeah. I know.
Are you in the
I'm
Are
not,
you a flower
because-
girl in this one too?
No, I am not a flower girl in this one. She only is having family because she has two sisters and her fiance has two sisters, and so like it's just that's kind of a big bridal party already.
All right, one of your best friends, and you're not a bridesmaid. Okay, we see what's going on here. All right.
I mean, maybe she's pushing me out. No, we don't know. All right, let's take one more call. We gotta be quick. 518, gotta be quick. 518, you were the final call of the day. Boop. Hello.
Well, they were
518.
really quick. That was
Very
fastest.
quick.
All right, not actually the
caller.
final call of the day. Sorry, 518. Calling from a 308 area code. I hope you're not listening on the tractor.
No, I'm outside of the tractor right now. But congratulations to your friend. I think you said Christy.
Yes.
Okay, congratulations, Christy. I hope you're not submitting yourself to the patriarchy. It's a bad thing to do, if we're being honest.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the marriage construct. We don't have time to get into that, Kowalski, but she's like my first really close friend to get married, so I'm actually pretty pumped about it.
Well, congratulations,
Thank you.
regardless. The reason I was calling in was my message yesterday seemed really bleak and dire, and that's because it is. I think people really do need to be paying more attention to this food situation, and I would highly encourage getting somebody on your program that could speak to the fertilizer situation and the long-term food situation, because it is looking basically more bleak by the day, and we've been experiencing very freak weather phenomenons globally that are just like blowing averages out of the water. Like significant heat, significant cold spells. There's been just early hail. It's been very
Did you see
strange.
that hail in Mexico City?
I did not.
It was, people should look it up. It was like a few days ago, it hailed to a degree that they were having to shovel it off the street in Mexico City.
We had hail about 50 miles west of my farm 5 days ago or so, and I was out there picking my brother up. I had to take shelter in a building. Once it had passed, there was about an inch of accumulation of hail. All the crops had been wiped out, and there was so much hail on the ground, it was creating a fog.
I'm so sorry.
Well, it wasn't any of my crops, and it destroys local bases. I mean, how great is that? We have a food system that incentivizes me to want my neighbor's crops destroyed in order to get a higher income.
Yeah.
Man, capitalism's wonderful. It's almost like we have very perverse incentives. But
almost.
I just thought I would give everyone some existential dread for the weekend. I hope you all have a very good one. Keep John Brown in your hearts and in your action. Good evening.
Good evening. Good.
Always, and thank you.
Yes, thank you for that bleakness, Kowalski. That will be the final call of the day. I am turning on the voicemail. We're going to read like 10 IMs, and then I am out of here. Yes.
I know you got to jump. Maybe we could cut the IMs down, but you have to pull this tweet up.
I
on
felt
the screen.
bad because I barely read any, but keep going.
You got to pull this tweet up on the screen. I'm sorry. This is hilarious. Republican Representative Greg Stube deleted a tweet where he says, in case you forgot, the sham January 6th committee hearings are purely for TV ratings. Pelosi let the Communist News Network, CNN he's referring to, build a full TV set where Abraham Lincoln's desk once stood. The congressman thinks that the TV screen behind the CNN anchors is actually the real floor of... Oh my God! I just don't even know what to say. This is the most hilarious thing.
What? That is somebody with maybe not more than 2 brain cells to rub together. Might be on. I might take the under on that one.
The guy who, by the way, in the gun violence hearings was the one at his house just like brandishing like 4 or 5 of his personal weapons. And,
lovely.
like, locking and loading them.
All right, let's read some IMs, and then we are getting out of here. I-5. I don't want to defend landlords in general, but for people such as actors who have unpredictable careers, investment in property has traditionally been seen as a safe way of securing an income during dry times.
Yeah, I mean, we know it's a good way to make money. The point is to structure society that's not the case.
Yeah. I don't know if I should even bring this up, but Julia Newmar, the 1960s Catwoman, is an example of this. On top of a career with peaks and valleys, she raised a disabled son on her own. I can't hate Julia Newmar. Yeah, I mean that.
But yeah, they should be able to raise a disabled son without being a landlord parasite.
Yeah,
like,
and
I'm sorry.
in the 1960s too, it was like a much more of an entryway into financial security than it is right now.
But like again, we shouldn't be relying on the inflation of speculative assets that we also live in to be ensuring a quality of life. It's just not a way to do it.
Southern Socialist. Drag shows are the Broadway shows of the proletariat. So much fun to watch. I've never had a bad time at those. Left is best. 100%. Nicole from Buffalo. Nancy Pelosi was a guest on Drag Race this season, and I had to turn off the show because I don't want my kids indoctrinated into the belief that we need a strong Republican Party.
I mean, that's the criticism of something like Drag Race.
Yeah.
That sort of bullshit.
Well, they had AOC on, which that's different, but...
Pelosi's going to be on for the second time as a guest judge. Unfortunately. She's like, hello, queens.
Oh, God. I mean...
You better work.
Is that as, what's faker? Her enthusiasm for Drag Race or her enthusiasm for the Golden State Warriors? Professional dumpster fire. In response to Candace Owens, she's really good at consolidating all the talking points into one confluence of hate. Not only is she attacking marginalized people, she's fomenting hate against public schools and government programs in general. Public sector workers really get demonized, and I am terrified of the future people like Candace Bear steering is us towards. 3 more. Mark Monkey, you're dead on about Jan 6 not being taken seriously when they don't recommend charges. The excuse made by people who write off Russiagate as being substantive have the fact that nothing happened as their proof. Never mind why Mueller couldn't act. The fact that they didn't/couldn't proves it was a nothing burger, because if it weren't, they would have done X, Y, or Z, and none of them read the Mueller report to see the reality. Reverend Knight, Democrats are collapsing in polling among young voters, black voters, and Latino voters, i.e. the most loyal parts of the coalition, because of disdain and inaction. They're doubling down on middle-class suburban whites who are either rabid partisans already or only voted Democrat to get Trump out. It's worth remembering how many Democrats split the ticket in 2020 to vote ours down ballot. Can the party survive nationally after another 2010-style wipeout in our majority? People already seem pissed off and demoralized. I don't know.
If you want to kill a party, the Democratic leadership's doing a great job of doing that.
And the final IM of the day. Affluence and wretchedness. I'm really disturbed by how common the social contagion theory of the increase in openly LGBTQ people has become.
Yeah.
Emily Bazelon cites it uncritically in her tortured New York Times piece
Horrible.
on the imaginary... I saw that. I haven't read it yet, but I saw the headline.
As somebody who listened to the Political Gabfest for a long time, like 10 or so years ago, come on, Emily Bazelon. As far as I understand, multiple pro-LGBT groups declined to participate after they found out the type of people she was looking to as experts for helping these kids, and they're all about denying the existence of these kids.
Emily Bazelon cites it uncritically in her tortured New York Times piece on the imaginary controversy of gender-affirming care for trans youth. There are more visible queer people not because it's cool and edgy to be gay or trans, but because the world was slightly less hostile to us for a little while. More young people feel safe enough to imagine queer futures for themselves, futures we're surviving for, futures that were not imaginable a decade ago. But no worries, the Substack Concern Troll crew and their besties at the New York Times are doing their best to reverse that progress. Well said. All right, guys. Appreciate it. I will see you next week, but I'm only in Monday and Tuesday, and then I'm on vacation for a week. So, very little of me. Enjoy it while you can. So I won't see you guys next week, but have a good time with
Sam episode, I guess.
with
Wow.
Sam.
I haven't done one
Yeah.
of those in a while. Fun.
And appreciate you all. Check out Doom. Check out Scam Economy. Check out Left Reckoning. Check out The Discourse. See you guys later. Peace.
See ya.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie fall. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive